Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode number 8 of the Game Audio Vlog. Last time, I found an error that I did not know how to fix. Called it the first unsolvable error. We're going to go shoot straight into what we're talking about today with this picture, where it says Wwise Bank Core, which is the name of my sound bank, failed to load, and we're talking between Wwise and Unity, obviously, here. This was the error I got last time. And then the error conditions, what causes the error are the game we're working with is called 3 rooms 30 seconds. In the loading the second and third rooms, the error is generated. So then what happens is I'm not getting any sound in the second and third rooms. In the case that we tested, we put sound to a button, and if it showed up in the second or third rooms, it didn't make a sound. I confirmed that this means that there's no sounds in rooms 2 or 3, because what's happening is the sound bank gets loaded for the first room, then reloaded for the second room, and reloaded for the third room. So when it's reloaded for the second and the third room, Unity or Wwise knows that the sound bank's already loaded, and then it's confused as to where to look, essentially. That's what's going on. So the way that I was loading the sound bank originally was through the inspector. I had the sound bank attached to multiple things, whether it be like the main camera or the event system or whatever. I tried different things to see if anything would work, and it didn't. So what I thought about after Googling and trying to figure out what the error was and if anybody had any of these errors that I could Google already, was that the next thing I needed to do was look at the code to see where the sound bank was actually being called, where it was being instantiated, essentially. And I didn't find any of that in the code, but I did learn where the game gets initialized, where the loading happens, and all of that. And what I realized very quickly is that Unity doesn't make any back-end code that we can see when you're using the inspector in this case. Maybe in other cases I've seen that. I'm not a full Unity expert, but I've seen where you do things in the inspector and code's generated from it clearly. But in this case, it's not. So if I were to take the inspector away and handwrite the code, what happens? So here's where I looked in and saw in my loader.cs file for C#, this is the game manager, the loader file, which loads then game manager. You see instantiate game manager. This is how the code works. So it loads this, instantiates the game manager, and then the game manager does all the actual loading for all of the game initialization. So you can see all of the instantiated variables at the very top, then the awake function, and at the bottom of the awake function is initialize the game. So everything loads before the game is initialized above that. So I want a sound bank to load right there before the game is initialized one time, and it doesn't have to unload, it doesn't have to be destroyed unless the game restarts, in which case I can find that code later, but we just want it to actually work one time. So that's my issue here, and I can see some of, like, you have an audio source for a locking sound, you've got the board script. This is in the else, just below the else statement is kind of where I know I want this to go. So what I looked into is to see if Audiokinetic had any code regarding loading a sound bank, and this is what I pulled up. There's a whole documentation on the Unity Wwise integration, and just documentation behind the Wwise API in general. And this is what it pulls up if you look for AK Sound Engine load bank. So this is giving you directions for the API in general. Essentially what it wants for C# would be AK Sound Engine dot load bank is kind of the syntax that works with Wwise's API. So what I learned through this is that if you look at returns, the bank ID, which is obtained by hashing the bank name, get ID from string, you may use this with onload bank. I may have read this a little bit wrong or walked through it a tiny bit incorrectly or whatnot, but essentially I needed to get the bank name, and then I needed to call a memory pool ID because your memory pool is what allows you to load in sounds and effects and all of that. You have a allotted bit of memory that you can use, and then you have your sound bank name. So I go in and I start typing in MonoDevelop, which is the developing tool that I'm using, the coding tool that I'm using. It has some autocomplete, so you can kind of cheat if you don't know what you're doing. in the very top picture, I'm sleuthing. I'm typing aksoundengine.getID, and I do getID from string, and then look, it shows me what I need to feed the function. I need to feed it a string, which is the string which an ID will return. So in this case, the string is the sound bank, and my sound bank string, the name of it, is core. So if I feed it that, which is the second picture down, then I will get back a number that is the actual ID number of the sound bank. So going in further and trying this, you can see I'm actually making a variable here, an unsigned integer, bank equals akSoundEngine get ID from string, and then I'll type in core, which then returns that in the second image. Then I would do akSoundEngine.loadBank with the bank integer for the variable, because as you can see in the little auto-filled sheet here, it's looking for a uint, which is, I believe, the universal or unsigned integer, bank ID, and then integer, which is the memory pool ID. So any integer isn't actually working. I Googled and found some stuff that led me to the function akSoundEngine.akDefaultPoolID. If you use that, then it would actually load in the default pool, which is what we want in this anyway, because we're using a very basic structure and setup. So I tried that, and it actually didn't work. It gave me some errors, which I was surprised at. So I then I then Googled around for the default pool ID, which I wasn't really squared away completely on understanding. And then I found this link that says Unity loading soundbank returns file not found, which is one of the errors that I got at one point. So in this, we have these examples here of something that works and what doesn't work. So in this case, he actually used a function uint bank ID, and then after the debug.log, which is his way of returning information. In this case, it'll output AK success, which means that he did the function right. But the actual function itself is ak.soundengine loadbank. Environments underscore global is his sound bank name here. And then you've got akSoundEngine.defaultPoolID, and then out bank ID. The out prefix is a specific thing with encoding that it's kind of rough to explain off the top of my head, but essentially it's a variable that you instantiate outside the function that then is used within the function and returns a specific output, depending on what happens actually in the function. It's a variable that you want to dip in the function and then have return a value. You can actually look at Google for the out prefix on actually I believe it's just about any coding language, but in this case you would use C#, and that's how I went about actually learning and understand. There's a couple of different prefixes you can use, but for the sake of it, you actually don't really need to know what that integer is returning, or what that what the integer is returning. You just need to know that you actually need it. So go ahead and put a unsigned integer with whatever name you're using, and then put that at the end of your function. It'll return. If you want to understand it, go understand it. If you don't want to understand it and you just want your audio to work, then throw that in there. That actually ends up working out. Here's my version of the code with bank ID. My bank's name is core, and then there's the akSoundEngine.akDefaultPoolID with the bank ID variable at the very end of it. That actually made it work. Successful. So there is something that I was very confused on, that I didn't understand what I was doing, didn't know how to actually load a sound bank by hand, by code, and there it is. I'm trying to explain it the best I possibly can. I'm not the most super well-off understanding programmer in the world, but to go back again, there's the function. You're just calling the API akSoundEngine.loadBank for loading a sound bank. You need the sound bank name, then you need akSoundEngine.defaultPoolID in this specific case, because all I care about is the default memory pool. I'm not going in and playing in specific memory pools and doing some more advanced work. And then an out integer for bank ID. So, which you instantiate before uint, and then whatever you want to call the actual variable itself, and that'll work. It'll be good to go. So that is episode 8. Episode 9, we're going to load in a couple more sound effects, make the game start to take some shape. I'm going to show you what that looks like, just repeating the process that we did at the very beginning with the button, and then putting them in the game, show you how that looks in the game unmixed. And that will probably be episode number 9. So thank you for tuning in again. That's how you walk through a problem that you don't understand what you're doing. Ping everyone you know. Google it your head off. I did actually email the developer to see if he had any ideas on it. Didn't hear back as fast as I wanted to hear, but then again, I'm trying to solve this quickly so I can get another vlog episode out. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow.